Aaron sat alone in the waiting lounge of the great orbital airport, his tall frame resting on a simple metal bench instead of the luxury seats reserved for important guests. The hall was full of noise, announcements, footsteps, the constant sound of ships landing and leaving, but his eyes remained fixed on the arrival gate ahead. 3 days had passed since he first came here. 3 long days of waiting without leaving the terminal. For most people, it would be impossible to remain in such a place for so long. But Aaron was not most people. He was a billionaire, a man who owned great industries, transport fleets, and even mines on distant colony worlds. With his power, he could have ordered a private lounge, a quiet room, or even a ship to circle above until the person he sought arrived. Yet he chose to wait here, in the open, among travelers from across the stars. The airport itself was a wonder of human achievement. It was not built on Earth but in orbit above a blue and green planet, one of the busiest transit hubs in this region of space. Humans mixed with aliens in every corridor, tall-scaled merchants from desert worlds, short round traders with wide eyes, and even silent robotic workers rolling through the crowd. But among all this diversity, Aaron stood out. Not because of his wealth, for most did not recognize him here, but because of his unshaken patience. Workers began to notice. On the first day, security officers had quietly checked him, wondering if he was lost or waiting for someone who would never arrive. On the second day, shopkeepers and travelers started whispering about him, the man in a dark coat who never left, who kept his eyes fixed on the gates as though guarding a memory. And on the third day, his presence became something like a story told between passengers. Some believed he was waiting for a lost friend. Others thought he was waiting for someone who had died long ago, unable to accept the truth. A few even said he was a strange prophet, guarding a secret only he knew. But no one knew the real reason. Aaron himself could hardly explain it. He had everything a man could want: wealth, ships, reputation, but in his heart there was a hollow space that riches could not fill. Many years ago, in the chaos of human expansion into the stars, he had lost someone dear to him. He never spoke of her name, but he never forgot the last promise he had made: I will wait, no matter how long it takes. And so here he was, sitting in the busiest airport of the quadrant, staring at the endless arrival lists that blinked across the giant screens. Every time a shuttle landed, his chest tightened. Every time a crowd passed through the gates, his eyes searched for a familiar face. But every time, disappointment followed, like a shadow that never left. The staff grew curious. A young worker approached him once and asked politely if he needed help, but Aaron only shook his head and said, I am waiting. His voice was calm, but his eyes revealed something heavy, something unspoken. On the third night, when the lights dimmed and the airport entered its artificial cycle of quiet hours, Aaron still did not leave. He sat with his coat wrapped around him, watching the stars beyond the glass windows. The stars looked so close here, sharp and brilliant, yet unreachable. They reminded him of the years that had passed, of choices made and chances lost. A group of alien merchants passed him, speaking in their sharp language. One of them looked at Aaron and whispered something to the others. They all glanced back, their eyes filled with curiosity. Even those who did not understand human customs could sense the strange weight around this man. He was not ordinary. His waiting carried a kind of strength, even if it seemed foolish. By the morning of the fourth day, whispers about him had spread even further. Children pointed at him curiously. Travelers asked guards about him. Some even made up stories. One claimed he was waiting for a secret bride from another world, another said he was meeting a long-lost partner who had been in cryosleep for decades. Aaron ignored all of it. His world was narrowed to the arrival gate and the hope that each opening door might reveal the face he longed to see. But inside, even he began to wonder. Was this waiting meaningless? Was he holding onto a shadow of the past while the rest of the universe moved forward? Doubt pressed on him like a heavy weight, but every time he thought of leaving, he remembered her voice. He remembered the promise. And so he stayed. When the announcer called for new arrivals that morning, he leaned forward on his seat, his eyes sharper than they had been for days. A group of passengers came through, carrying bags, talking, and rushing toward connecting shuttles. His heart raced as his gaze moved across each face. But none of them was the one he waited for. He leaned back slowly, closing his eyes for a moment. The ache inside grew stronger. Yet he did not rise. He did not walk away. Aaron would wait. He had waited 3 days already, and he would wait as many more as needed. Because somewhere beyond the stars, he believed, the person he sought was on her way back. And when she arrived, he wanted to be here, not in a palace, not in a private lounge, but in the place where travelers of all kinds first set foot after their long journeys. Here, among strangers, he would keep his promise. And so the billionaire remained seated, silent and patient, his figure a mystery in the endless tide of the galaxy's travelers. The orbital airport was more than just a building, it was a city in the sky. Huge glass walls showed the endless stars, while dozens of landing platforms stretched outward like metal wings. Each day, hundreds of ships came and went, cargo freighters, luxury cruisers, small colony shuttles. Travelers from across the galaxy filled the halls, moving with bags, machines, and stories from worlds Aaron had never seen. In such a busy place, one man waiting on a bench should have been invisible. But Aaron was not invisible anymore. 3 days of sitting in the same place had turned him into a question for everyone who passed. By now, nearly every worker in the terminal knew about him. The cleaning staff, who polished the glass floors every evening, whispered about the man in the long dark coat. Security officers, who walked the halls with scanners, kept an eye on him but never found any reason to stop him. The shopkeepers, who sold food and souvenirs, often glanced at him as they served customers. Rumors began to grow like branches on a tree. Some said he was a secret inspector, watching the staff in silence. Others believed he was waiting for a very important guest, perhaps a politician or a royal from another system. A few thought he was simply mad, a lonely man who had lost his way. But the truth was far simpler, he was waiting for one person, and one person only. Aaron did not mind the whispers. His thoughts were far away, tied to the past. Every time a crowd passed through the arrival gates, he searched the faces carefully. His eyes, sharp and restless, looked for the one person he could not forget. Each disappointment added another stone to the weight he carried inside, but still, he did not move. On the 4th day, his waiting began to attract attention beyond the workers. Travelers themselves started to notice. A group of students from Earth, carrying digital sketch pads, sat nearby and quietly drew him. To them, he looked like a character from an old story, tall, silent, with eyes that carried both strength and sorrow. An alien merchant, tall and scaled with a voice like grinding stones, pointed him out to his companions. They spoke in their language, but their gestures were clear. Even those who did not know human customs could sense the strange determination in Aaron's stillness. "Why does he wait?" one guard asked another as they stood near the gates. "He says nothing," the other replied. "Only that he is waiting. And that is enough for him." By the end of the day, Aaron had become something more than a man, he was becoming a story. People who had never spoken to him carried his image in their minds as they left on their ships. They told others, in distant places, of the billionaire who sat waiting in the terminal of the great orbital airport. Some laughed when they heard. Others felt a quiet respect. But none of them knew the truth of his promise. That evening, when the lights dimmed and the terminal entered its night cycle, Aaron remained where he was. He did not sleep much, his body rested but his mind stayed awake, listening to the sound of arrivals, always ready for a familiar voice. A boy selling sweets from a small cart rolled past him and stopped. "Sir, would you like to buy something? You've been here for days." Aaron looked at him gently and shook his head. "Not today. I am waiting." The boy nodded, though he did not understand. He pushed his cart onward, telling himself he had met a man who was part of a living legend. The next morning, the rumors spread further. A group of travelers from a distant colony gathered near the benches just to see him. They whispered about how unusual it was for a man of wealth to sit in the open for so long. One of them said softly, "Maybe he waits for love. That is the only thing that makes humans do such strange things." Another replied, "If so, then he is strong. Few can wait so patiently in a place like this." Aaron heard none of this. His eyes were once again on the arrival gate. Another group of passengers stepped through, carrying bags and speaking in many voices. For a moment, he thought he saw her. His heart lifted, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was not her. His chest grew heavy once more. Still, he did not leave. By the end of the 5th day, the whispers had become a quiet wave that moved through the airport. Even people who had never seen him spoke of him, passing the story from one traveler to another. The man who waits. The billionaire who refuses to leave. The promise keeper. The names changed, but the idea remained the same. Someone with wealth and power had chosen to sit among the ordinary, not moving, not complaining, not giving up. And though no one knew it yet, his waiting would soon draw the attention of someone unexpected. Because while the galaxy's ships continued to arrive and depart, while strangers walked past without knowing his full story, a pair of small eyes had already begun to notice him. Eyes belonging not to a worker, nor a guard, nor a traveler, but to a little girl whose arrival would change everything. The 6th morning at the orbital airport began like any other. Ships docked, gates opened, voices echoed across the hall. Travelers hurried toward their flights while others rushed to meet loved ones. The crowd moved like a river, flowing in every direction. And still, Aaron sat in the same place. His dark coat rested neatly on his shoulders, his tired eyes fixed on the glowing arrival gate. The world around him moved, but he remained still, as if time itself had chosen not to touch him. Most people no longer asked who he was. By now, the story of the waiting billionaire had already spread through the airport. People knew he was there, and though many whispered about him, no one dared disturb his quiet. But that morning, something different happened. Through the bustling crowd came a small figure, a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, with dark hair tied in a messy braid. She held a small travel bag in her hand, much too large for her tiny frame. Her steps were uneven, almost hesitant, as she wandered into the waiting lounge. Unlike the adults rushing past, the child stopped to look around, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. She studied the glowing boards, the glass windows, the busy shops. But soon her gaze fell on Aaron, who sat silently at his usual bench. She tilted her head, watching him closely. Something about him drew her, though she could not explain why. Perhaps it was his stillness, or the way he seemed both lonely and strong at the same time. The girl walked toward him, her shoes making soft taps on the polished floor. She stopped right in front of him, clutching her oversized bag with both hands. For a long moment, she simply stared at him with innocent eyes. Aaron noticed her presence and slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes, weary from days of waiting, softened as they met hers. He had seen thousands of faces pass by in the last few days, but this one was different. "Hello," the girl said in a small but clear voice. Aaron blinked, surprised. Few had spoken directly to him in days. "Hello," he answered gently. "You've been sitting here a long time," she said, her tone matter of fact. "I saw you yesterday too." He gave a faint smile. "Yes. I have been waiting." "For who?" she asked without hesitation, as only a child could. Aaron hesitated, then replied, "For someone important to me." The little girl studied his face carefully, as though searching for a hidden truth. Then, with surprising boldness, she said, You shouldn't wait for too long. It makes people sad. Aaron let out a soft laugh, the first in many days. Perhaps. But sometimes waiting is the only thing you can do. The girl tilted her head again. Her eyes, bright and curious, seemed to hold more wisdom than her age allowed. After a pause, she said something that startled him completely. Why don't you wait for my mummy instead? Aaron's smile faded. He looked at her carefully, unsure if he had heard correctly. Your mummy. The girl nodded seriously. Yes. She's coming today. She's been traveling for a long time, but she always comes back. She's very kind, and she works hard. You should wait for her instead of being sad all the time. For a moment, Aaron was lost for words. The honesty of a child's suggestion struck him deeply. He had spent years building empires, making decisions that changed lives, yet he could not find an answer to this simple question from a little girl. What is your name? He asked softly. Marin, she replied, clutching her bag tighter. And my mummy's name is Lyra. She's very brave. She always says waiting is a sign of love. Aaron's chest tightened at the name. Lyra. A name he had not heard in many years, yet one that lived inside him every single day. Memories stirred memories of a woman with gentle eyes and a strong spirit, who had walked beside him once before the galaxy's chaos separated them. He stared at the girl in silence, his heart beating faster. Could it be? Marin looked at him with curiosity. You look like someone who waits because he promised. Did you promise too? Aaron swallowed hard. Yes, he whispered. A long time ago. The child smiled, as if satisfied with his answer. Then maybe you are waiting for the same person I am. Her words felt like a key turning in a locked door inside him. For years, he had carried his waiting like a burden, but now this little girl had turned it into something else, something filled with possibility. Before Aaron could ask more, the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, Shuttle 34 from the outer colonies has arrived. Passengers may proceed through Gate C. Marin's face lit up. She clutched her bag and pointed. That's her ship. My mummy is here. Aaron's heart pounded as he followed her gaze toward the opening gate. Travelers began to stream out, weary from their journey. Among them, he searched desperately, his breath held tight. And then he saw her. A woman stepped through the gate, her figure tired but graceful, her hair tied back simply, her eyes scanning the crowd. She carried no luxury, only a worn bag slung over her shoulder. Marin let out a joyful cry and ran toward her. Mummy. The woman bent down, dropping her bag, and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Her face glowed with relief and love. Aaron stood frozen. His eyes filled with disbelief and wonder. It was her. After all these years, after endless waiting, she was here, Lyra. His heart whispered the truth he had been afraid to believe. His waiting had not been in vain. And soon, he would have to face the question the little girl had asked him, one that carried more weight than anything he had ever been asked before. For a long moment, Aaron did not move. He stood in the middle of the waiting hall, his eyes fixed on the woman embracing her daughter. The noise of the airport, the announcements, the rushing footsteps, the chatter of travelers faded until all he could hear was the echo of his own heartbeat. It was truly her. Lyra. The years had left their mark on her. Her face showed the quiet strength of someone who had endured many hardships. Her clothes were simple, her travel bag old and worn. Yet her presence was unchanged, gentle, steady, and filled with the same warmth he remembered from long ago. Marin pulled back from her mother's embrace, her eyes sparkling. She pointed toward Aaron. Mummy, look. This is the man I told you about. He has been waiting for you. Lyra followed her daughter's gesture. Her gaze landed on Aaron, and in that instant, time seemed to stop. Her eyes widened in shock, then softened into disbelief, and finally filled with something deeper recognition. "Aaron," she whispered, almost to herself. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Lyra, after all these years." For a moment, neither spoke. Their silence carried memories that words could not capture: the laughter they once shared, the promises they once made, the cruel distance that had torn them apart when humanity scattered across the stars. Marin looked between them with curiosity. "You know each other?" Lyra knelt to her daughter's side, her voice gentle. "Yes, my dear. Long ago, before you were born, Aaron and I were friends." She hesitated, then added softly, "He was very important to me." Aaron's eyes glistened at her words. Important. After everything, she still thought of him that way. Lyra rose to her feet, facing him fully now. You waited here? All this time?" Aaron nodded. "I promised once. I told you I would wait, no matter how long it took." Her lips trembled, but she held her composure. "That was years ago. You built empires, Aaron. I heard of your fleets, your industries, your wealth. Why would a man like you sit here, waiting, when the galaxy itself bends to your will?" He looked at her with quiet honesty. "Because none of it mattered without you." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of his years of patience. Lyra's eyes lowered for a moment, as though she carried her own burden. "I left because I had no choice. The colonies needed workers. I had to provide for Marin. Life was not kind, but it gave me her. She is my strength." Aaron glanced at Marin, who was now hugging her mother's arm while staring up at him with wide, trusting eyes. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a warmth he had not known in many years. Marin spoke suddenly, her small voice cutting through the silence. "I told him he should wait for you, Mummy. He looked sad, but now you are here, so he doesn't need to be sad anymore." Lyra placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head, her heart torn between past and present. "Child, sometimes life is not so simple." But Aaron shook his head. "Sometimes it is. I waited because I believed you would return. And here you are." Lyra's eyes searched his, as if trying to see the truth hidden within them. She saw not the billionaire that others spoke of, not the powerful man who controlled fleets and industries, but the same Aaron she had once known, the man who kept his promises. "You haven't changed," she said softly. Aaron smiled faintly. "In some ways, I have. Wealth, power, reputation, they came to me. But inside, I remain the same man who once told you he would wait." Marin tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, does that mean he was waiting for you all this time?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Yes, Marin. It seems so." The little girl's face brightened with innocent delight. "Then I was right? He really was waiting for my mummy." Her laughter rang out, drawing smiles from a few nearby travelers who had paused to watch the reunion. To them, it seemed like a scene from a story, something rare and beautiful in the endless tide of departures and arrivals. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She had survived so much long journeys, harsh colony life, endless work to raise her daughter, but she had never expected to meet Aaron again. And yet here he was, unchanged in his devotion, standing before her as though no time had passed. Quietly, she asked, "What do you expect from me now, Aaron?" His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed his heart. "Nothing. Only that you know I never forgot. And if it takes another lifetime, I will still wait." The honesty in his words left her silent. She looked down at Marin, who now held both their hands, as though trying to connect them. In that small gesture, Lyra saw the innocence of her child and the persistence of the man she once loved. The past and present had met in this airport, in this single moment. And though Lyra gave no answer yet, though her heart was still torn by doubts and fears, she could not deny the truth: Aaron's waiting was not in vain. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if destiny had brought them back together not by chance, but by the strength of a promise that had never been broken. The arrival hall was still buzzing with voices and movement, yet for Aaron, everything seemed strangely quiet. The sight of Lyra standing before him after all these years made the rest of the world fade. He had imagined this moment countless times on long nights when he stared at the stars, during business meetings where his mind wandered, in the quiet hours of waiting at this very airport. Yet now that she was truly here, it felt unreal. Lyra stood with her daughter's hand in hers, her travel bag resting at her feet. Her face carried the marks of years spent working hard in distant colonies, but her eyes were still the same. Calm, gentle, and full of quiet strength. Maren looked from her mother to Aaron, smiling as though she had solved a mystery. "See, Mummy. I told him he should wait for you. And he really did." Lyra placed a soft hand on her daughter's head. "You always speak too boldly, little one." But her gaze did not leave Aaron. Aaron took a slow step forward. His voice was low, but steady. "I thought perhaps I would never see you again." Lyra's expression softened, though her tone carried both warmth and caution. "Life has a way of sending us down different paths. I never thought our paths would cross again either." Aaron's eyes glistened. "But I kept hoping. That is why I stayed. That is why I waited." Maren tilted her head, puzzled. "Mummy, why does he talk like he's in a story?" Her innocent words made a few travelers nearby chuckle quietly. Even Lyra smiled faintly, though there was sadness in it too. She knelt to her daughter and whispered, "Because sometimes real life feels like a story. Especially when the past comes back in a way we never expect." Aaron watched her carefully, his heart aching at the sight of her with Maren. He could see the strength in Lyra's every gesture, the way she protected her daughter, the way she carried herself with quiet dignity despite her simple clothes. She had lived through hardships he could only imagine. "You raised her well," Aaron said softly. Lyra straightened, pride shining in her eyes. "She is my reason for everything. The colonies were not easy, but she gave me strength to endure." Maren tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, did you know he's a rich man? People say he owns ships and stars." Lyra's gaze flickered back to Aaron, as though seeing him in two ways at once: the powerful billionaire the galaxy spoke of, and the young man she once knew who made promises under the quiet glow of stars. "Riches don't change the heart," Aaron said, almost as if answering Maren. "I may own ships, but what I longed for was something I could never buy." Lyra felt her chest tighten. She remembered long ago, before the colonies pulled her away, when Aaron had told her something similar. Back then, she had laughed and told him he was foolish. But now, after years of hardship, she understood his words in a way she never had before. The people around them began to notice the unusual reunion. Travelers slowed their steps. Some whispered quietly. Others simply watched, sensing the weight of the moment. It was not every day one saw a man of great wealth standing humbly before a woman from the colonies, his eyes filled not with pride, but with longing. Aaron did not care about the eyes upon him. His focus was only on Lyra and the child beside her. "I told you once that I would wait," he said, his voice steady though emotion trembled beneath. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. I am still the same man who made that promise." Lyra's lips parted slightly, as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. Too many emotions swirled inside her: memories of the past, the struggles of the present, the unexpected meeting of both worlds in this airport. Maren looked between them, her young face filled with hope. "Mummy, does that mean he was waiting for you all this time? Really all this time?" Lyra hesitated, her throat tightening. She nodded gently. "Yes, Maren. It seems so." The little girl's eyes widened with wonder. "Then you should not be sad anymore. You both found each other again. Her innocence drew a soft laugh from Aaron, though his eyes glistened. Children see truths more clearly than adults sometimes. Lyra lowered her gaze, hiding the storm of feelings inside. She had spent so long surviving day by day that she had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at with such devotion. A part of her wanted to push him away, to protect herself and Marin from hopes that might break. But another part, a deeper part, felt something awaken. The announcer's voice echoed once again across the hall, calling passengers to new departures, reminding everyone that the airport was a place of movement, not stillness. Yet Aaron did not move. Lyra did not move either. And Marin stood between them, smiling as though she had already written the ending of their story in her mind. The crowd around them began to thin as travelers went on their way. Soon, the three of them stood together in a quieter corner of the hall, the noise of the world fading into the background. Aaron took a gentle breath. Lyra, I do not ask for an answer now. I only ask that you know my waiting was real. And if I must wait again, I will. Her eyes lifted to his, filled with a mix of fear, tenderness, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. And in that moment, the busy airport filled with strangers, ships, and endless movement felt to Aaron like the center of the universe. Because she was there. The three of them stood together near the edge of the arrival hall, where the noise of the airport softened into a distant hum. Ships still landed, voices still echoed through the speakers, but to Aaron, it felt as though the world had shrunk into this small circle of space: himself, Lyra, and Marin. For a long time, none of them spoke. Lyra's hand rested gently on her daughter's shoulder, while her other hand clutched the strap of her worn travel bag. Aaron stood quietly before them, his eyes steady, his heart filled with both hope and fear. It was Marin who broke the silence. She tilted her head, studying Aaron with the same curiosity she had shown when she first approached him. Then, with the boldness only a child could carry, she asked, "Why don't you marry my mummy instead?" The words were spoken so simply, so innocently, that they cut through the heavy air like a bright light. Aaron froze, stunned. Lyra gasped softly, her face flushing with shock. For a moment, she could not even respond. "Marin," she whispered, her tone both firm and embarrassed. "You mustn't say such things." But the little girl only looked up at her with wide, honest eyes. "Why not? He was waiting for you all this time. Doesn't that mean he loves you? And you always said love is the most important thing." Her words hung in the air, innocent yet powerful. A few travelers nearby, who had paused to watch, chuckled softly. Others smiled warmly, touched by the purity of the child's voice. Aaron's heart ached. He wanted to laugh, but his chest was too heavy with emotion. Slowly, he knelt down so his eyes were level with Marin's. "Child," he said gently, "marriage is not something you decide with simple words. It is a promise, a great promise." Marin nodded quickly. "Yes, I know. You are good at promises. You kept one already. You waited." Her reply struck him deeply. For years, he had wondered if his waiting had any meaning. And now, here was a little girl, Lyra's daughter, telling him that his waiting itself was proof of his worth. Lyra placed her hand firmly on Marin's shoulder. "Enough now," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is not a matter for you to speak of." But Marin looked up at her mother stubbornly. "I only said the truth." Lyra sighed, caught between embarrassment and sorrow. She turned her gaze back to Aaron, her eyes filled with emotion she could not hide. "She speaks too freely. Please, forgive her words." Aaron shook his head slowly. His voice was calm, but there was warmth in it too. "There is nothing to forgive. Children see things we try to hide. Sometimes they speak truths we are too afraid to face." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She turned away slightly, as though afraid he would see the emotions rising in her eyes. The crowd around them had thinned now, leaving them in a quieter corner of the hall. The echo of Marin's question still lingered. "Will you marry my mummy instead?" Aaron rose to his feet again, his gaze steady on Lyra. "I will not answer her question here, not with so many eyes watching. But I will tell you this: I am ready to wait again, as long as it takes. If one day you wish me to stand at your side, I will. And if not, I will still keep the promise I made long ago." His words were spoken with calm strength, not force. There was no demand in his tone, only patience, the same patience that had kept him on that bench for days, the same patience that had carried him through years of silence. Lyra's eyes glistened. She remembered the young man she had once known, the one who had looked at her with the same unwavering devotion. Now here he was again, older, changed by time, yet still carrying that same flame in his heart. "I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "Life has been hard. I have Marin to think of. I cannot make decisions like this so easily." Aaron nodded. "I understand. I do not ask for an answer tonight, or tomorrow. I only ask that you know my waiting is not finished. It will not be finished until you tell me it is." Marin, still clutching her mother's hand, looked up with a smile that broke the tension. "See, Mummy. He's not scary. He's kind. And he's patient. That's good, isn't it?" Lyra pulled her daughter close, her heart torn between the past and the present. She wanted to tell her child that life was not a simple story, that love carried burdens, that choices had consequences. But deep inside, she also knew Marin was right in one thing: kindness and patience were treasures no wealth could buy. The airport's loudspeakers called out another departure. The tide of travelers flowed on around them, each person carrying their own story, their own hopes and losses. But in that small space, the three of them stood as though set apart from the rest of the galaxy. Aaron looked once more at Lyra, his voice quiet but certain. "Whatever answer you give, I will be here. Waiting, as I always have." For a long moment, their eyes held. No promises were spoken, no answers given, but something had shifted, something unseen but powerful. And though Lyra turned away slightly, as though to protect her heart, her hand did not let go of Marin's. Nor did her gaze fully leave Aaron. The child's innocent proposal had broken through walls built over years of hardship. The question could not be undone. "Will you marry my mummy instead?" It was not an answer, but it was a beginning. The airport had begun to settle into a quieter rhythm. The morning rush had passed, and most travelers had either moved on to their next destinations or waited quietly for their connections. Ships landed and departed, their engines leaving brief echoes in the vast hall, but in the small corner where Aaron, Lyra, and Marin stood, time seemed to slow. Aaron remained calm, though his heart thumped loudly in his chest. He had spent years waiting, through countless doubts and disappointments, and now, after everything, he stood before the woman he had never forgotten and her daughter. Marin tugged gently at her mother's sleeve. "Mummy, he waited for you. Isn't that the bravest thing?" Lyra smiled softly, brushing her daughter's hair back. "Yes, it is. But bravery is not only in waiting, Marin. It is in living, in caring, and in facing life no matter how hard it may be." Aaron watched them, taking in the quiet connection between mother and child. He realized that strength was not measured by wealth or power, as he had once thought. True strength was patience, kindness, and the courage to hope even when hope seemed impossible. The little girl, sensing the importance of the moment, looked up at both adults with wide, trusting eyes. "You see, Mummy. He's a good man. He kept his promise. That's stronger than any starship." Lyra looked at Aaron, her eyes full of unspoken questions. The years apart, the hardships she had faced, and the life she had built for herself and her daughter weighed heavily on her. And yet, she could not ignore the truth before her: he had waited. He had remained faithful to a promise, not for gain or recognition, but for her. Aaron took a careful step closer. Lyra, he said softly, I do not ask for your answer now. I only ask that you know my heart. I will wait as long as it takes, and I will honor every choice you make, because nothing is more important than your happiness and your safety. She felt a lump in her throat. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years, of promises, and of humanity itself. Here was a man who had power over ships, colonies, and industries, yet he stood humble and patient. He had waited without demands, without complaint, and without expectation. Lyra looked down at Marin, who squeezed her hand, then back at Aaron. She saw in him not a billionaire, not a figure of fame, but a human being, the kind of human whose patience and courage reminded her why humanity endured in the vast, sometimes harsh galaxy. The little girl smiled brightly. Mummy, you can tell him now. Or later. But you know he is waiting, and waiting is good. Humans are strong that way, right? Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. Yes, Marin. Humans are strong. Sometimes our strength is in waiting, in caring, and in never giving up. Aaron felt a quiet joy rising in his chest. He had never been happier to wait, and never more certain that his choice had been right. Waiting had brought him here, to this small moment, to this place where the past and present met. The arrival hall sounds, the ships, the announcements, the chatter of travelers filled the air again, but it no longer seemed overwhelming. Instead, it felt like a rhythm, a pulse connecting them to the world around them. Humans, aliens, machines, all moving, all living, all striving in their own ways. And in the middle of it all, a promise had been kept. Marin, sensing the mood, hugged her mother's leg and whispered, "See? He waited for you, and you're here now. Isn't that amazing?" Lyra bent down and kissed her daughter's head. "It is amazing," she said softly, her heart full of gratitude. Then she looked at Aaron. "You showed me something important today. Humans are not strong because of money or ships. Humans are strong because they care, because they wait, because they keep their promises and their hearts open." Aaron nodded. "Exactly. That is why I waited. Because even in a galaxy full of wonders, it is love, patience, and hope that make life worth living." Marin jumped slightly with excitement. "See? That's why humans are the strongest in the galaxy." A few travelers nearby smiled quietly at the child's words. To them, it seemed like a story that could teach even grown adults something new. Strength was not in power, not in wealth, not in domination, but in patience, honesty, and the courage to care for others. Lyra's gaze softened. She took Aaron's hand gently in hers, not as a promise of a future, but as a recognition of the past and a willingness to see what might come. "I cannot answer everything now," she said softly. "But I see your heart, and I understand why you waited. That is enough for today." Aaron's lips curved into a gentle smile. "That is more than enough. I will wait as long as it takes. For you, for your daughter, for whatever the future may hold." Marin clapped her small hands together. "Yay! Humans are really strong," she shouted, drawing a few amused smiles from passing travelers. The sun, or rather the distant star beyond the glass walls, shone through the orbital terminal, casting a warm glow across the three figures. In that light, the waiting, the hope, and the quiet love that had endured for years seemed to shine as brightly as any star in the galaxy. Aaron realized then that wealth, power, and fame could never compare to this, the strength of humanity, the strength of hearts that wait, love, and hope. And in that small corner of the orbital airport, the billionaire, the mother, and the child shared a quiet understanding. The universe was vast, unpredictable, and sometimes harsh, but humans could endure anything, because their strength came from within. Aaron's waiting had ended, not with riches or glory, but with belonging, patience rewarded, and the quiet victory of the human spirit. And for the first time in many years, he felt completely at peace.